It all started with a strange phone call. It was around 11 p.m., and my sister and I were sitting on the sofa watching TV. The house phone rang. It was an unknown number. My sister said not to answer. Maybe it was an advertisement. But curiosity got the better of me, and I picked up the phone. "Hello." There was no sound, just a soft hiss. A few seconds later, I heard a woman's voice, a weak, trembling voice calling my name. "Sarah? Is that you?" My heart stopped. The voice was so familiar, but I couldn't remember it. "Yes, it's me," I said. "Who are you?" There was no answer. Just the hissing got louder, and then the woman's voice said again, "Help, help." This time her voice was full of panic. "They're here. I can't escape," I asked in a trembling voice. "Who are you? Where are you?" But the call was disconnected. My sister looked at me with concern. "Who was it? Why are you pale?" she asked. I paused momentarily, then said, "I think it was Aunt Maria's voice." What made the story even scarier was that Aunt Maria had died in a car accident 5 years ago. Her phone had been lost with her. This fact hit me like a sledgehammer. My sister was scared. She said, "This is not a joke. You must have dialed the wrong number or someone is bothering you." But my instincts told me something else. The woman's voice sounded exactly like Aunt Maria's. I couldn't sleep that night. Her voice and those scary hisses kept playing in my head. The next day I checked the number. It was gone as if it hadn't even existed. A few days passed. I tried to forget the call, but the phone rang again. This time it was 2 a.m. from the same number. When I answered, I heard a deep breath. "Sarah, they're coming for you. Be ready." I asked in horror. Who? Why? But the call was disconnected. My body was frozen. I stayed up all night wondering if this was just a cruel joke or if something real was happening. The next morning I spoke to my mother. She was just as shocked as I was. She said, "This can't be real. Maria is dead." But that wasn't the end of it. Every night the phone rang and I received strange messages from that number. Messages like, "Running," "It's late." Once I even received a photo of myself in my sleep. I was so scared that I didn't know what to do. I decided to report it to the police. They checked the number but said that no one with that description was registered. They said that someone might be using a fake device, but they didn't have an explanation for the photos. One night, another call came in. This time the woman's voice was quieter, but she said clearly, "You have to go to the old road. That's where I died. There are answers." I was filled with fear and curiosity. I decided to go there. My sister was against it, but I was sure I had to do it. When I got to Aunt Maria's accident site, I didn't find anything unusual until I heard a rustling sound in the trees. My heart was pounding. I turned on my flashlight and headed toward the sound. There was an old cell phone on the ground, the same phone my aunt had been carrying that she had lost in the accident. When I picked it up, its screen lit up. A message appeared. "Now you know. Be careful," and it immediately turned off. He didn't call me again when I got home that night. But something inside me tells me that this isn't the end. Sometimes at night, I think I hear someone breathing on the phone, even when my phone isn't ringing. I have always believed that the real thrill in this world is not in wealth or power. It is in hunting. But my hunt was different. My hunt was people. Let me begin my story with the quiet nights that brought this thrill into my life. My name is not important, because you may have heard of me before. You may have read about me in the newspapers or the local news, but what no one knows is the truth behind the image they have of me. I always went out at night. Why? Because the night is quieter, the darkness is empowering. The first time this feeling awakened in me, I was 23 years old. I would walk the deserted streets of the city and look at people. Everyone had their own story. but there was something about some of them that attracted me. I remember my first victim well, a middle-aged woman with short white hair and a tired face. I met her in my small neighborhood store. I knew she lived alone and talked to herself all the time. She seemed weak to me. That was enough. I followed him at night. I checked his house. I learned his habits. Everything was carefully planned until that night came. The night of the hunt. I lurked in the shadows with my sharp knife and black leather gloves. I heard his footsteps approaching his house. I stood in the darkness, holding my breath. It only lasted a few moments. He never realized what had attacked him. The warm, sticky feeling of blood on my hands was something I will never forget. The first time was strange, but not scary. It was thrilling. This feeling of power, of complete control over the life and death of another, was something I couldn't let go of. I did it again and again. Each time I planned more carefully. Each time I wanted more excitement. I made up new stories for each victim. Some I hunted in secluded parks, some in their own homes. I always left no trace. I was always one step ahead of the police. But what you need to know is that this wasn't just a murder to me. Each victim was a part of me. Their story, their life, their last moments. They became part of a collection I had created in my mind. A mosaic of lives that only I could see and feel. Sometimes I tell myself it was wrong, but then my inner voice says, "You are an artist and this is your art." Every stab, every last breath was part of this work of art. And I can't stop the artist inside me. But know that this is not the end of the story. My next victim is on the way. Maybe it's you. Maybe someone is watching you in the dark right now. Perhaps it's me. One night, in a house where a family of four lived, the phone rang. The father of the family picked up the phone. My voice was soft and sharp. "Have a good night." My voice was like a whisper in the wind. "Excuse me, you?" the father said hesitantly. But I didn't answer. All I heard was a short, lifeless laugh. He hung up, but my game had just begun. 10 minutes later, I called again. This time the mother of the family answered the phone. "What do you want? Who are you?" Her voice was filled with anxiety. My answer was simple, everything. Then I imitated the voices of their children on the other end of the line. A cry that sounded real. The mother screamed, "Where are they? What have you done to them?" And I just said, "Just look out the window." The father ran to the window with a knife, but no one was there. There was only a small note taped to the glass. "Wait until dawn." My game continued. I tormented them for hours. The sound of footsteps coming from behind the phone. The meaningless laughter. Even the sound of their locks opening and closing. Their terror was part of my pleasure. By dawn, they had had enough. They called the police, but there was no sign of me. Only fear remained. The fear that I know drives them to the brink of madness every night. And that's just one night in my life. The night my art evolved. The night the hunt didn't just end in blood, but penetrated the minds of my victims. It was a new beginning. I've never believed in the paranormal. My world has always been based on facts, evidence, and the unwavering certainty that every mystery has an explanation. That is until the night I answered a phone call that revealed everything I thought I knew about reality. It started 3 months ago. My name is John, and I work as a journalist at a small newspaper. Most of my days are spent chasing stories about local politics, minor scandals, or the occasional feel-good piece about a rescued cat. But that night, I was at home, trying to finish a piece about a recent series of burglaries in the area. It was just after 1 a.m. when my phone rang. The screen showed an unknown number. I hesitated for a moment. Late-night calls from strangers were never a good sign. But curiosity got the better of me. "Hello," I replied in a hoarse voice. At first, there was nothing but static, faint and uneven, like the sound of an old radio trying to find a station. Then, a voice, A woman's voice, shaky and distant. "John, help me." I froze. My name wasn't exactly common, and the way she said it felt personal. "Who is this?" I asked, my voice firmer now. The static grew louder, and then the voice again, barely above a whisper. "They're coming for me. I'm on." The call suddenly ended. I stared at the phone, my heart pounding. The voice was familiar. The voice sounded like my sister Sarah. But it was impossible. Layla had died in a car accident 2 years ago. The rest of the night was a blur. I couldn't sleep, replaying the call in my head. By morning, I had convinced myself it had to be a prank. Maybe someone with access to an old recording of my sister's voice. But who? And why? The next day I tried to trace the number, but when I checked my call log, the number wasn't there. It was as if the call had never happened. I didn't tell anyone about it. Not yet. I didn't want people to think I was losing my mind. It happened again 2 weeks later. This time it was 2:17 a.m., asleep on the couch, when the phone vibrated and woke me up. Unknown number. I answered, my heart already pounding. "John." The same voice, softer this time, trembled. "Why didn't you help me? Who is this?" I demanded, trying to keep my voice steady. "Who are you?" "Do you know who I am?" the voice said. It was Sarah's voice. There was no doubt now. "I don't understand," I said, my throat dry. "Sarah is dead. Who are you?" The line went silent for a moment, then one word, "basement," and then the call ended. I sat there, the phone still pressed to my ear, trying to figure it out. My apartment didn't have a basement, but the house I grew up in, the house Sarah and I had lived in with our parents, did. The next morning, I drove to our family's old house. The shutters had been drawn and the lawn had grown overgrown, abandoned since my parents passed away. Walking through the front door was like stepping into a time capsule. Dust covered the furniture and the air was thick with the smell of mold. I walked to the basement door, the old wooden steps shaking under my weight. The basement was dark, the single overhead light casting long shadows on the concrete walls. At first, nothing seemed out of place. There were boxes of old clothes, broken furniture, and forgotten toys scattered around. But then, I saw it, a small, black flip phone lying on the floor in a corner. My stomach turned. It was Sarah's phone, the one she had with her the night of the accident. The police had told us it had been lost in the accident. I picked it up, my hands shaking. The screen was cracked, but when I pressed the power button it came on. There was a new message. Asterisk, why didn't you save me? Asterisk, I dropped the phone and turned back. My chest tightened, and my breaths were shallow. This can't be happening. I took the phone to a friend of mine who worked in IT. I didn't tell him the whole story. I just found it and needed to recover any data it might contain. He agreed to help, though he looked at me strangely when I handed it to him. He called me a day later. "Where did you get this, John?" he asked in a serious voice. "Why?" "Because it hasn't been used in 2 years. The last outgoing call was the night of your sister's accident." My blood ran cold. "And the incoming calls?" I asked. "There are none," he said. "It's like the phone hasn't been active since that night." He hesitated. But what? "There's a recording stored here. It's strange. You should listen to it yourself." That evening, David handed me the phone. The recording was dated the night of the crash. I pressed play, and Sarah's voice filled the room. "It's me, John. I don't have much time. If you're hearing this, it means I didn't make it. I need to know the truth. They are lying to you." The recording ended abruptly. I started digging. I went through old police reports, interviewed witnesses, and pieced together the events leading up to Sarah's death. What I found shocked me. The accident wasn't an accident. Sarah had been running from someone. A man named Alex, someone she'd worked with briefly. He'd been stalking her for months, and the night of the crash he called the police and said she was wanted. But the report had been buried. No follow-up, no arrest. It was as if someone wanted the case to go away. That night the phone rang again. This time I didn't hesitate. "John," Lila's voice said, calm and steady now. "You found it. You know the truth. I'm so sorry I didn't find out sooner, I said, tears streaming down my face. It's not your fault, he said, but you had to finish this. He's still there. Oh, Alex? The voice trailed off. Then he whispered, look behind you. I turned and saw a shadow move across the room for a split second. The police arrested Alex a week later. He was living under a false name and hiding from the public. The evidence against him was overwhelming, and he confessed to stalking Sarah the night she died. After that, the calls stopped. The phone was dead. It screened forever black. I buried it next to Sarah, the weight of the guilt I had carried for so long. To this day, I don't know if these calls were real or a figment of my imagination. But one thing is certain. Truth has a way of finding its voice, even from beyond the grave.